Questions to Atheists, Part 1, on Personal Experiences of God, from October 13th, 2023. So reasonably fresh. Well, you got me, you know I love questions to atheists. Hi, my name is Scarlett, and I am an atheist and skeptic, and today, yes, we are looking on personal experiences of God as proof of a God. Kind of interesting, since last week I talked about divine hiddenness looking at Mike Winger. Ooh, that's not a good screen cap. Sorry, Mike. But today we're going to look at the flip of that. What about people who say they've had experiences? Here is the image that the author used to illustrate the blog post, and I guess it's supposed to represent a goofy Christian in church. It is kind of funny, so maybe this is the person's stance. I have to admit, I have a bit of trouble deciding what this Ajit Balakrishna Nair thinks and believes. They had questions for all kinds of religions and then random political blog posts and all kinds of things. Their about says, here are the best definitions of me that may or may not change, so let's look. Number 1, I am changed. I change the environment changes me, and I cannot do anything about it even if I want to, until I'm dead. Yeah, I can't argue with that. Number 2, a craving baby with no clue what it craves. That's what we all are, aren't we? At least when we saw the world and the world saw us for the first time. And I'm not sure that that is true, and I'm not quite sure what it means. I'm just guessing some of these are meant to be a little tongue-in-cheek and funny. Let's go on to number 3. One part of a whole. Nothing more, nothing less. We have no identity independent of the universe, or what we consider to be the universe. Well, I guess that's true insofar as we exist in this universe, and without a universe, I mean, what would we be in? Whatever we're in, we would call a universe, in any case. This all kind of sounds like what philosopher Daniel Dennett calls a deepity, saying something with two meanings, one that is trivially true, and the other profound-sounding, but false or nonsensical. But really, I only looked at this to try to figure out where this author is coming from, and to be honest, I'm still not quite sure what their religious beliefs are. But let's look at what they're talking about in this Questions to Atheists, and specifically on experiences with some deity. Our author starts out, atheist disbelievers, and that is D-I-S-S, they disbelievers, when believers claim they experienced God. Here below is the gist of the argument. Parens, if you already know it, skip to my question here. We're not going to skip it because we're going to see what the argument is. Let's go. Quote, we cannot assume that everything imagined in mental experiences, which include dreams, hallucinations, etc., actually exists. Such experiences cannot be repeated, tested, or publicly verified. Mystical and other personal experiences can be explained by other causes, end quote. This is according to a neutral website that provides arguments of believers and atheists. So my first thought is, I agree with this. If we had a dream or a hallucination, or we interpreted an experience in a certain way, there's no way to go back in time and look at that. And there can be other explanations besides the supernatural. But let's go look at this neutral website. I'm curious what it looks like. Hello, 1990s web. Yeah, I see you there, copyright 1997. Called it. All right, the part in question has to do with a proof of God, which is experiential. And it reads, a very large number of people claim to have personal religious experiences of God. And the objection to this is, we cannot assume that everything imagined in mental experiences, etc., the quote we just read a minute ago. It's not a bad little website. It lays out that polytheistic conceptions of God were criticized by monotheistic religions, and then it lays out some arguments for the existence of God and against the existence of God. Very simple, very straightforward. And in the middle, it includes this nice paragraph, general objection against all the rational proofs for God. Each of the above arguments is independent of the others and cannot logically be used to reinforce the others. The cause argument, even if it were valid, would prove only a first cause. It would tell us nothing about the nature of that cause, nor whether the cause was mental or physical. It would not prove that the first cause was the personal, judging, forgiving God of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. It would not prove the existence of a designer or of a perfect being. Equally, the design argument would prove only a designer. The ontological argument would prove only the existence of a perfect being, and so on. None of these arguments individually can prove that the cause, designer, or perfect being were one and the same. They could be three different beings. Yeah, so it's an interesting website. Really not a bad source to be quoting from, and I will link that in the description below because it is more succinct than I could ever be. But let's go back and find out our question. We continue with a quote from Wikipedia. The atheistic conclusion is that the arguments and evidence both indicate that there is insufficient reason to believe that any gods exist and that personal subjective religious experiences say something about the human experience rather than the nature of reality itself. Therefore, one has no reason to believe that a god exists. I think this is making the point that we can experience something and then we have an interpretation of that thing that we've experienced, and sometimes we tell ourselves stories. We have to be careful about our interpretations of some of our experiences. And just to be clear before somebody goes and taps away in the comment section, I don't mean every experience, but sometimes there are things that we do misinterpret. That can even be something as mundane as somebody's intentions. We can find out years later that our interpretation of their intention was completely wrong. And that's just a banal thing, much less something like a supernatural claim. But let's keep going. We haven't even gotten to our question yet. He inserts, here is an example of an atheist who is simply pissed off at the stupidity. This is from X, formerly known as Twitter. Sean, all out of bubblegum McClure, so much wailing and gnashing of teeth over not just, quote, God, but over atheist rejection of that ludicrous idea. If your God exists, demonstrate him, all caps, and do so believably, not just with the tired old, quote, personal spiritual experience and God is evident bullshit. I love Sean. I think I would have a beer with Sean. Let's go back to our author, though we still haven't gotten to the question. Ooh, and this part is helpfully entitled, The Question. Yeah, I love it. All bold. All right, let's get to it. The problem with, quote, mental experiences and, quote, personal subjective religious experiences is they cannot be proved correct or wrong, and the cannot and the or there is bolded for some reason. And yeah, mental experiences or personal subjective experiences, it's true. Yeah, it's hard to prove them. That is sort of like your opinion, man. Okay, coming back to this. If you're an atheist, surely there must be something in your past for which there were neither other witnesses nor recorded on any devices. I had to stop there because it's like the grammar. There must be something in your past for which there were neither other witnesses nor recorded on any devices. I think there's a verb missing. There were neither other witnesses nor were they recorded on any devices. Okay, that's better. The event/experience exists only in your memory now. Yeah, that's true. All right, where's the question? Would you refuse to believe the experience happened just because you cannot prove it, because it's a subjective experience, and subjective is bolded? If your answer is yes, would you care to explain why you believe in your own subjective experience without proof, but not in the believer's experience? I think there's something wrong with the grammar here, because I think what they mean to say is, would you still believe the experience happened even if you can't prove it because it's a subjective experience? And the answer would be yes. I think that is what's going on here, and I think there's a problem with the way the grammar is working. But okay, I'm going to talk about the unreliability of memory in a minute, because I think it's important to understand that our memories are not perfect recording devices of the past. But I also want to address this interpretation of events, that we can interpret something that's happening to us, and that interpretation may be correct or it may not be correct. So we can experience something and not understand it, and we develop a story about it. And I'm going to tell you a story about something that I experienced when I was a teenager. I had a friend whose mother worked in what we thought of as a haunted workplace. It was an old house that had been converted into an office, and she was the office worker for a cable company back when these cable companies were small, before these giant things like Verizon and Comcast came to be. And her job was to answer calls, make sure that orders were taken down, give the cable guys their orders, and she was alone a lot of the day. Now, if she was in the front room, what would have been an old living room, sometimes she could hear dishes clattering around in the kitchen, and they did keep the kitchen as a kitchen, and that's where they had their lunch, and she could heat up coffee and things like that. When she went in to explore, nothing was going on, everything looked fine. While she was in the kitchen, sometimes she heard the typewriter, and yes, it was a typewriter. This was the 80s. There were still typewriters around. She would hear typing on the typewriter. And again, remember, she's the only person there. She would go back to the front room, and there would be nothing there, and there would be nothing typed on the typewriter. Everybody said this was a ghost. They had a little nickname for her, the ghost. The ghost was Larry. They did a little investigating and found out that somebody had committed suicide in the house back, I don't remember what year now. And one time they decided they were going to try to either contact this ghost or exorcise the ghost or whatever. So some adult knew somebody, and I was actually a participant in this, where we went to the house and they tried to contact the ghost. And a lot of weird things happened. Like the tables started dancing, like there was clattering in the kitchen. Like my friend and I were walking past the stairway and a light just randomly went on. And when we went upstairs, there was nobody around where the light switches were. So these were some things that happened to me, and I can corroborate this by talking to my friend and say, hey, do you remember the time we did the thing? And she can say, yeah, wasn't that really weird? And at the time, I was still a theist, and I still believed in a supernatural, so I thought that maybe we were really contacting a ghost. The question is, were we? How do you explain these things? Nowadays, I don't really have a good explanation for those things. I'm not quite sure what we witnessed, why they happened, what was going on. I can give you another thing that happened to me in the past that I do have a better explanation for, at least I think I have a better explanation for. When I was in college, I was in a sorority. The sorority was in an old house, and it was said to be haunted. And one of the things that would happen is that you would hear somebody walking in the staircase when nobody walked in the staircase. And it was something you could go check, and you could go ask somebody, did you just come up or down the stairs? And frankly, you could just go out and check. You could go look and see if somebody was coming up the stairs or coming down the stairs. And sometimes you were alone in the house and experienced this. Now, it was an old house. And what I eventually figured out was when you take whatever it was, like 12 to 15 girls, all getting ready about the same time of the day in the morning, or even to go out at night, and they all go down the stairs. At one point, the stairs release. This is old wood, and it pops back up, and it sounds like footsteps. Now, to be honest, for all of these things, I can't be 100% sure of what actually happened. I can tell you these things, but I don't have a way to explain what it was I experienced or saw. So what I would take with a believer is think, you had an experience of something that you interpreted as being the supernatural or being a deity, but how did you establish that this was actually a deity and not something else, not a more mundane explanation? So coming back to why I would accept my own experiences, well, I experienced them to the best of my ability. This is the memory, and I would like to think that at least some of my memory is fine. And I have interpretations of my events. And when I talk to a believer, I can accept that they experienced something, but I'm not sure about their interpretation, especially if they just say, well, that's just what I think happened. But let's go back and let's see what else this person has to say. If you were to talk about an experience from your memory to someone, how would you prove to them you are not delusional or lying? You're a believer too. You believe trust in your own memory without proof, don't you? Now, of course, people could be delusional and they can lie. But if I am honest, the best that I can do is say, this is my recollection to the best of my ability, and this is the way I interpreted it. Another person, by the way, is free to think that I am delusional or lying, and I have no control over how they receive my experiences. And that's the thing, is we don't control what other people think of what we believe or what we say or any of that stuff. But I will grant you that we're all walking around thinking that the things that we hold in our head are true and that our memories are pretty accurate. And I don't know, that's just the nature of being human, I guess. Let's keep going. The blog states, if a believer says they experienced God, there are 3 possibilities. 1, they are telling the truth. 2, they are lying. 3, they are delusional. When each of these seems equally plausible, why are you betting on 1 or 2 of those without proof? Oh my gosh, this is like a throwback to C.S. Lewis, the trilemma about Jesus that is just bogus. But let's not get off into a tangent on C.S. Lewis, but that's just what I'm thinking of right now. So here's what I have to say about this. 1 is, I can believe that the person is telling me the truth, and yet their interpretation of that event, whatever it is wrong. I'll give you some ideas of what I've heard as proof of God, as proof of experience of God, I should say, that it's like, how did you connect God to that? I used to watch a lot of the Atheist Experience, and sometimes the people had just downright silly ways of connecting their experiences to God. So one time there was a person that was going through a low part of their life, and they prayed to God, and a couple weeks later they found a Bible in their garage. A Bible that they knew that they had, and it's just they came upon it. And the disconnect between when they prayed and when they found the Bible, first of all, is like, what Why didn't you find it right away? How is finding something 2 weeks later proof of God? How is finding a Bible you knew you had proof of a God? Is this the best that your God can do? There was another person prayed for a sign from God and a moth flew in their room. Like, really? This is like some Greek god magic bullshit. Anything could have happened, basically, and they would have said that was the sign from God. So in both of those cases, I can accept that the person prayed, they wanted a sign from God, and then they found the Bible or the moth flew in. But what I reject is the connection that that was from God. But let's get back onto the subject of our imperfect memory. We all like to think that our memories are these perfect, pristine things, like we've taken a recording of the past. Now, on a mundane level, who hasn't had the experience of talking to somebody about something that you both experienced together and finding out that they remember it differently? And unless you can get some concrete evidence, like a picture from there or a recording or a video or something, you can't solve this. Who has the correct memory? You're both going to walk away thinking that the other person is wrong and you have the correct memory. But this has been studied, and so my suggestion is, if you want to go into memory studies, look at Elizabeth Loftus's work on imperfect memory and manipulated memory. And this is just something, a quick summary I found. I've listened to her talk on podcasts. It's all very interesting stuff. This is the person that discovered that false memories can be implanted. If you'll recall an experiment that was done where they convinced adults that they were lost in a supermarket when they were children, and they implanted some false memories. But around that, these adults put a lot of narrative around it that wasn't a part of the implantation. So our memory is very malleable. This episode that I'm taking this from, episode 91, How Memory Can Be Manipulated, starts out, our memories may not be as reliable as we think. Once we experience an event, most of us likely assume that those memories stay intact forever, but there's the potential for memories to be altered or for completely false memories to be planted, according to Elizabeth Loftus, PhD. Loftus, a distinguished professor at the University of California, Irvine, is an expert on human memory, and she discusses how our recollections of events and experiences may be subject to manipulation. And then it says on her About the Expert part, facts, ideas, suggestions, and other post-event information can modify our memories. Now, I am by no means an expert on memory. I have done quite a bit of reading in this area because my research area was on Holocaust memoirs, and specifically holes in memory, imperfect memory, things that cause a lot of anxiety in survivors where their memory was imperfect. But anyway, here is where I come down on this. Some of our memories are likely completely perfect. They're great. We can share them with other people. We get corroboration. We can look at photos, because nowadays we can take photos and videos of a lot of our lives and get corroboration. And the more you've talked about something, the more that memory is probably accurate. And I'm talking about the raw memory, not the interpretation of it. Then there is the interpretation of the memory, the interpretation of the events at the time, I should say. Like I said earlier, maybe I get in an argument with somebody and I think that they are motivated by something, and then I find out later that actually we had a misunderstanding. I've carried forward a bad interpretation of events. But some of my memories may not be right. I have misremembered things, or I have disputes with people, so I think that we do have to take a more humble approach to our memories, because our minds are not perfect. And there are so many things that are going on in who we are, why we interpret things the way we do, etc. Now, I think in terms of talking to somebody and believing their interpretation of events, if somebody said, I used to go to church as a child and there was a choir that used to sing on Christmas and I loved it and it was very moving and I had great feelings and it was a nice time for my family and the sermon was fine, I'm going to accept that, like, at face value. And if they say they like it, I'm just going to accept that. I mean, they might be lying, who knows? But if they tell me that during one of these services, the Holy Spirit would come down in the form of a dove and talk to everybody and reveal Jesus's presence in their lives, I don't think I would believe that. I would think that something else is going on there, that the person is misremembering that, has tacked that on for some reason after, or perhaps they are delusional or lying. I would not believe that particular part of it. It seems to me, though, if there is a God that wants to have a relationship with us, why doesn't that God make itself known in a way that we can all accept, however it is for us personally, that that is what is happening? Why do we have to rely on other people who may in fact be delusional, who may in fact be lying, who may in fact be misremembering something, who may have misinterpreted what happened, or who are making a connection that does not seem logical to me. Like you find a good parking space and that is proof of God in your life. It just seems to me if a God is capable of proving itself to some people on the terms that they can understand, then it is capable of proving itself on the terms that all of us understand. I mean, if we are talking about the Christian God, for example, that is all perfect, that made us and wants a relationship with us and all that. All right, let's go back and finish out the blog. Irrelevant, but I have never experienced God in a way that makes me a 100% believer. BT dubs. Well, good to know. My question back to this person is, well, do you believe that people have actually experienced God? And why are you accepting those? On what basis? All right, that's what I have for you this time around. What did you think about this question to atheists? What would your answer be? Put it in the comments below. And while you're down there, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff. You know I love it when you do the YouTube stuff. If you like what I do, you can buy me a coffee. That is in the description below. And I will see you next time for something good, snarky, something anyway. See you then.